The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and you're very welcome to this, the Parents Jury's first ever webinar. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and I'd also like to thank Karen Kingham, who has very kindly put together the webinar and will be presenting it for us this afternoon. Karen will be answering any questions you might have at the end of the presentation, so if you do think of a question, please pop it into the chat box and then select the Send to Staff option, and then Karen will answer any questions at the end of the presentation. Now, I will shortly be handing over to Karen to continue or to start the presentation. This is also a first for us, as we're based in Melbourne and Karen is in New South Wales, so please bear with us, and we're hoping that the technology will allow us to do this. So I'll hand you over to Karen now, and I will be speaking to you again at the end of the presentation. Thanks.
All right, I think I'm actually now up and on stage. So I just want to welcome again everyone who is who's actually turned up for today's webinar, and I hope that you take away some helpful information. And as Angela said, if for some reason I haven't been able to answer any of your burning issues, please do make sure you type in a question for me to answer afterwards. And let's get going. So, who am I? I'm a dietitian and I'm a nutritionist. I'm also a mum. I have 2 children. Now, my children have moved along from the fussy stages, but it doesn't mean to say that I don't have strong memories of how we managed to get by those fussy eating times. So I've got lots of tips and tricks for you later on in this presentation through my own experience, and plus this is my knowledge as a dietitian. But I'm also a writer and a blogger, so you may well have read my work before. I've written for Practical Parenting, I've written a couple of books for kids, I've worked for recipe magazines, and these days, because most of us are preferring to do screens rather than paper, I'm doing a lot more online content. So I write for blogs, and I also have my own blog, which is kind of a bit more of a little bit of a hobby, and where I can write about things that I want to write about and what other people want me to write about. So have a little look around the web, and you'll find more information of things that I've written that might actually help you out as well. Okay, sorry, we seem to have frozen there. So what's on the menu for today? Well, obviously we're going to be looking at fussy eating. And fussy eating is really probably one of the main concerns parents have, eating issue concerns parents have. So what I'm going to talk about today is about what drives fussy eating, because I do really believe that if you can understand the basis for some of your children's behaviours, it makes it a whole lot easier to either accept or to work around it. And then I'll provide you with some tips and tricks that'll take the sting out of some of the behaviours that you're getting around food. So one of the drivers to fussiness, particularly around the way your children are developing. So really, as our children become toddlers and they start to become more understanding of who they are, they actually want to take a little bit more control over their lives. And unfortunately, food is a great tool for this. So really, a lot of the behaviours that we see in our kids around food are actually less to do with food itself, but more to do with where they're at socially and emotionally in a lot of cases. One of the other drivers to fussiness is growth. If you think about your baby and how fast they grew in their first year of life, like babies are just eating and growing machines. Our babies will triple their birth weight in their first year. So they could grow anywhere up to 8 kilos in their first year, which is massive. So of course they need to feed that growth. But as our children move from babies to just young children and they go into that toddler stage, their growth slows down quite a lot. So, compare 8 kilos to 2. It's a massive reduction in growth rate in their second year of life and then beyond. But one of the most important things that I think parents don't appreciate is how strongly appetite is dictated by growth. Really, our children are very, very in tune with their hunger, and their hunger is driven by their growth. And growth is not continuous, though. It's not just something that happens incrementally throughout their lives until they hit 18. Growth comes in bursts, in fits and starts. I mean, we all, if we see how, all of a sudden the pants don't fit and things like that. So growth is very much in bursts, and as a result, so is their hunger and their appetite. So if you kind of scratch your head sometimes and wondered, well, he ate or she ate like they were starving, last week, and then this week I can't seem to get much more than a few mouthfuls out of them at meal times. It's likely that really they're just responding to their appetite, and their appetite is responding to how fast they're growing at the time. So we have to trust the kids are very in tune with their hunger and their needs based on how they're growing and their appetite, which can be quite frustrating, especially when you dish up a great meal and they don't eat it. I'm completely with you there in that concern. Another one of the drivers to fussiness is something called neophobia. Now, this word gets bandied around a lot these days, so you may well have heard it, but if you haven't, what neophobia is just an innate cautiousness to new things, new foods particularly. And our children are just naturally suspicious of anything that's new, and that's a protective mechanism that goes way, way back in evolution. And our job, I guess, really is to just make food familiar. So when we introduce a new food and it's refused, it's not necessarily, the reason is not necessarily that they don't like that food. It's more likely that they just, that neophobic response has kind of kicked in. And so they're just going to refuse. And the way around that is as I said, to make new foods more familiar. And we can do that by simply just making that food appear on their plate more often so that they see it. They might touch it. They get to know that new thing on the plate, and eventually it's just something there that they've recognised and they're familiar with, and eventually you'll find that they're likely to eat it. So neophobia is a incredibly frustrating trait of young children, and but if you can persevere, be patient, and also try not to dish up too much, particularly if you know they're not going to eat it, but making it there on the plate or the table, and just continuing to gently, suggest that they try, they pick it up, they become familiar with at least the way it looks and smells, will make a difference to the fact that they will eventually get around to trying it and potentially liking it. Drinks. Drinks are another driver to fussy eating. A tummy full of fluid has no room for food. So being aware of how much your children are drinking is really important if you've got a fussy eater. Because often, children are inherently lazy with their food. They're much more likely to eat something they don't have to chew, and they're much more likely to want to drink something than eat something because it's really easy, particularly if it comes in a bottle with a teat or a cup with a straw. So if you've got a child who's over 12 months of age, then ditching the bottles is a really important thing to try and do, particularly for the majority of their drinks, and moving to cups, sippy cups and cups with straws is really where you wanting to try and head with drinks. But one of the things I do really encourage parents to do with their children when they're starting them out on food and then progressing through with drinks is to really introduce that regular cup. Okay, a regular cup, no spout, no lid, no straw, just a normal cup, a normal small plastic cup with a little bit of water. And to make that cup with a little bit of water in it a habit for meals and snacks. One of the best habits that we can instill in our children is a love and a habit of having water to drink when we're thirsty, and making water the drink that children preferentially ask for if they need a drink. Given the rates of obesity of our children and the role of sweet drinks in that, water drinking is a really important habit to instill in our children if we can. And so to that end, I really do encourage, as I said, cups of water at meals. And you know, when you're out, or if you're out and about, of course you need a practical solution to drinking, and so spout bottles or spout cups and cups of straws are really important for those times. But when children are sitting down and eating, giving them a cup with a little bit of water in it is the best way to go to encourage that habit for drinking fluids. And the beauty of a cup without a spout or anything is that it slows them down as well. Children can't drink from a cup as nearly as quickly as they can from something with a spout or a straw. So it just also moderates the liquid intake that they have. But like any fluid, water or juice or milk or any other sorts of drinks, if they drink too much of those before a meal, they're less likely to be hungry for food. So some other drivers to fussiness that are perhaps a little less common are those that revolve around things like taste sensitivity, and then there's allergies and intolerances that can also drive fussiness in our children. Now, taste sensitivity is an interesting one. Our babies and young children have really, really acute ability to taste, because they have many, many, many more taste receptors in their mouths than we do as adults. So when you perhaps tried some of that baby food and just went, whoa, isn't that bland, you're tasting something completely different to what your child is tasting, because they have so much better sensitivity to taste. That can actually work against them if they have quite a sensitive taste and a sensitive palate, because there are a lot of vegetables, particularly vegetables out there, that have some bitter notes to them. And so if they're actually tasting, if they're a very, very sensitive taster, then they might be actually tasting some of those bitter notes quite significantly, and therefore they aren't very tasty to them, and they are actually not pleasant. But as I said, I mean, this is something that's perhaps a less of a common driver to fussiness. Allergies and intolerances can also, as I said, drive fussiness, and if you do suspect an allergy or an intolerance in your child, the best thing to do is to actually have an appointment with your doctor or to see a dietitian to talk that through, because the ways around the fussiness that results in these sorts of situations need more specialist help. So we know what drives fussiness, so should we be worried? I mean, the things that we need to say to ourselves before we worry about our kids and their eating is to consider how they're growing. Are they tracking on their growth charts when you go and visit the when you stop in for their health checks with the Early Childhood Centre? Are they healthy? Have they just got the occasional sniffle? They're not sick all the time. They're not in hospital with pneumonia. That's often a sign that you've got a child that's run down and suffering from some sort of, perhaps potentially some nutritional issues. But the average, the standard run of colds and flus for kids is generally that they get over, is usually not an issue. And are they active? Are they running around? Are they getting into everything like they should be as a young child? I mean, if this is the case, then no, you really shouldn't be worried. And if there are some issues around those questions, then it's probably important for you to go and have a chat with your GP. But if you would say yes to all of those, then you definitely don't need to worry. But you also don't want to get stressed because stressing out really just reinforces the attention-seeking behaviour that's going on around food. It gives food far, far more power than it really needs to have. And it just makes our meal times unpleasant. I mean, heaven knows, we get to the end of a day and we all really want to just be able to sit down and enjoy a good meal. We don't want to have to engage in power struggles over food. And it's probably the time of the day that we're least well equipped to do that, is that evening meal, when often the war tends to break out. So do you make them eat? I mean, cleaning the plate is a very old school way of thinking, and to be honest, children are just like horses. You're not ever really going to be able to make them eat, and it's futile trying. I guess the other important thing is that anything really isn't better than nothing when it comes to food for young kids, because no one really wins when you give in, and you basically just destine yourself, or you are destined to become a short order chef if you're going to want to try and win over your child at meal times with whatever they like to eat. Children really need to eat family meals, and they need to learn that they eat what everybody else eats. And it can be a hard lesson to start with, but to persevere means that everyone wins, really. So my best advice is to relax and practice the division of responsibility in feeding. Now, this is a fabulous strategy that was put together by the US feeding expert Ellen Sater. Now, it's a very tried and true method, and what it does, it's very simple. It really just requires us as parents to provide good, healthy food for our children. So we provide the good, healthy food, we provide it at the meal time that it's appropriate, and we provide it at the best location for that. So be it at the table, be it, you know, on a picnic rug, wherever, but it's the parents' responsibility to provide what, when and where around a meal, okay? But it's our children's choice to eat it or not. And as a parent who worries about what your child eats, this particular part of the responsibility can be quite difficult. But it's really all about putting your trust in your child. Because as I said before, if we go back to growth, you know, growth is what drives their appetite. And young children are probably the most in tune of any of us into what they really need. And we have to really trust that. We have to trust that they know what they need to eat. But by the same token, we can't trust them that they know what they can eat. Because to be honest, if it was up to our children, they would all be eating party food at every meal. So we need to provide the good food, and we need to trust our children to eat it. The important thing with this division of responsibility is to remember that no one's going to starve. There is never a meal that's too far away, or there will be a meal that's never too far away. If you think about it, I mean, our children's lives are almost a continuous feast. You know, they go from breakfast to morning tea to lunch to afternoon tea to dinner and maybe even a supper. So, you know, there is another meal that for your child, you know, 2 to 3 hours away. And so don't be afraid if your child is just, you know, mucking around with their food and they're not going to eat it, to just simply take it away. It goes back to that, actually taking away the power of food. Because I'll never forget the first time I actually ever did that to my daughter, and the look of horror on her face when I walked away with her plate of food. It was just like, you can't do that. And I did. And it was over. That was it. There was no more battle at that particular time. It was, okay, off we go and play. We'll try again at another meal. And sure enough, you know, they come back and they've had the opportunity to get a little bit more of an appetite, and the next time the food comes out, they will eat it. I guess I have parents say, well, what about dinner? You know, they can't go to bed hungry. But to be honest, if the meals, if the evening meal is not being eaten and it's just being pushed around a plate and there's performances going on, everyone is better off if that food is taken away. And you can negotiate a supper if you really think that you don't want your child to go to bed hungry, and you can negotiate a supper around the removal of that food and say, okay, if you're hungry before you want to go to bed, and decide on a healthy food. Maybe it's, you know, some apple slices, or maybe it's, you know, some yogurt, or you provide the guide as to what will come next if they do actually want something to eat, and if they don't, they'd simply go to bed. If they are a little bit hungry, I don't think that's just going to, all that's going to do is make breakfast an even more voracious meal for them in the morning, and they will be fine. So a few more tricks around sort of getting the balance right, if you like, around that division of responsibility is to really know your nutrients, but also to focus on real food. So just to remember that kids need, you know, some regular dairy in their day. They need to have red meat 3 to 4 times a week for their iron and zinc. They need whole grain breads and cereals for fibre and B vitamins, and there's plenty of cheating breads and cereals, pardon me, out there for you know, white bread with added fibre and things like that. So there's, you know, there's plenty of options out there in terms of the healthy cereals, and that they need, you know, 2 to 3 serves of fruit and veg each day as well. So this is your responsibility, is just keeping the focus on real food, but knowing that you're ticking the boxes and what they need nutritionally. Feeding their egos is also something that that actually works quite well with with these fussy eaters. It's giving them control, but without the compromise. And by that, what I mean is that you know, dish up a meal on shared plates, and make it self-serve. Give control to your child, so for them to dish up their own meal. So, you know, you've fulfilled your part of your responsibility in terms of providing great food at an appropriate meal time, at an appropriate location, such as the dinner table. But you give control to your children to serve themselves. And you know, if they're still not proficient with a serving spoon or a set of tongs, then as long as they've got clean fingers, let them just choose what they want with their hands. They'll be fine. And gimmicks are also a great way to feed their egos. I mean, kids love to they love a gimmick, and to engage your children in meal times means that you're more likely to have success with food and eating. So, you know, go for, you know, fruit skewers, vegetable skewers, meat skewers, fancy straws for water or milk drinks, spring rolls, nutros, wraps. Spring rolls are a particularly nice one for little kids with as they're starting to get more dexterous, particularly the rice paper rolls. You know, if you can take charge of doing the rice paper and giving them a whole bunch of little bowls and things to assemble their own meal, I guarantee you can engage children in preparing their own meals. And wraps are the same. I mean, my 9-year-old son, you know, a meal where he can wrap up his food is the best meal ever, Mum tells me. And I must say also, nachos are a great way to get kids eating. Like particularly, I like to add lots of legumes to my food. So a nachos, which is lots of beans and not quite so much beef mince, but my children think all the Christmases have come at once when they can actually eat a meal with tortillas or with corn chips in it. And there are plenty of lower salt option tortilla crisps or corn chips out there that are plain without any flavouring on them that you can use. the joy the joy in our children when they're actually getting to eat a corn chip as part of a meal is quite amazing. Sang choy bao is another lovely little, this is one of my own personal finds. My daughter will eat salad vegetables till the cows come home, but the first time I ever got my son to eat lettuce was as sang choy bao, chowing down on a lovely, actually the cos lettuces work quite nicely for sang choy bao, because they're nice as long, they're like little boats. And watching him fill up a boat with rice and sang choy bao mince and just chomping through that, it brings joy to a dietitian's heart, I must say. So moving on, so growing or making your own food together is another very tried and true method of engaging fussy eaters in eating better. So as I said, with making the rice paper rolls or getting little kids to make fruit kebabs, making your own pizza with pita bread or muffins. You can add lots of great vegetables to the top of the pizza, and when they're making their own pizza topping, they're definitely more likely to be eating a pizza that they make than their own than if they are the one you made. We also know that taking food away from the table often makes it more acceptable to eat. So, having a backdoor herb or tomato pot's great, and kids that might not necessarily be eating the tomatoes off the plate are often more likely to eat the tomato off the bush or the snow pea or whatever. And alfalfa sprouts on a window is another great little vegetable growing opportunity. So as a dietitian, when I practiced and saw parents come to me with their problems, a lot of them, with their kids and eating, a lot of them would ask about supplements. And if you ever had that thought as well, I mean, as a dietitian, I would say most children don't really need supplements. However, if it makes you feel better that you're filling a gap with a vitamin or mineral supplement, and it means that you can take the pressure off your fussy eater because you believe that you're supplementing what they're perhaps not eating with a multivitamin, then look, I say go for it, because the thing is there is no harm to be done. It's really just an expense, and if that's an expense that you want to make and it makes you feel better and it means that you can relax more around meals, then I'm absolutely all for that. I do promote caution, however, around the kind of toddler drinks and those supplement kind of drinks, because the thing is that they can be counterproductive. Just like drinking is a driver for fussiness, introducing a supplement drink like the toddler drinks can just really make that fussiness worse, because really you're taking the edge off hunger, and you're filling them up on a liquid, which means that they're not going to have enough room for the food. And really, food is the best way for our kids to get their nutrition. So no child is perfect, okay? We all still need to remember that. And these are my children when they were little. And you know what? At 9 and 11, they'll still eat cake batter for breakfast. But the thing you have to remember is how good are your modelling skills? And I mean, certainly don't eat cake batter for breakfast. But the thing is, you need to actually, if we want our children to eat well, eat good foods, have great manners at the table, and do all those things that they need to do to become an adult that has a great sense around food, then we actually need to demonstrate those features to our children in our own relationships with food. So we have to think about how we model our own food behaviours to our children, because our children are mini-me's. You know, the number of times, I mean, I'm sure you've all heard something your children have said and you think, oh my heavens, that's what I say. Well, the thing is, it's also what you do. And so if you drink If you want your children to drink more water, then so do you. If you want your children to drink water with a meal, make sure you do too. If you want your children to eat more fruit and vegetables, you need to let your children see you eat them as a preferred snack, or that, you know, that plate full of vegetables that you have at a mealtime. Your children need to see you eating well, and then so that they actually know what eating well is. And it's very, very important. They soak it up. So here's a little bit of information about recommended reading. A couple of books there that I've been involved with, Babies and Toddlers and Eating Well with Growing Children. The Women's Weekly have just put out a lovely recipe book with some great information, nutrition information that's come from Joanna McMillan. Breast Bottle and Bowl, which has been out there for a very long time and is a great go-to book about food for kids. And then Choosing the Right Stuff, which is also it's a great book just about advice on labels and e-numbers and stuff you might want to know when you're out shopping. So I guess what that leads me to is whether or not anybody's got any questions. So far, my question panel looks very quiet. Yep, it's still looking quiet. So I guess what I'm going to say is I hope that I have been able to answer some of your questions with the course of this presentation today. And I guess if there's anything that I want you to take away from this is that you do, it's trust in your child and being relaxed around meal times that will see you through the hard yards of fussy eating. Okay? I think I'll hand over to you.
Hi, Karen, it's Angela here. We did have a couple of questions, so I'll just run those past you, and then I'll just give you the questions, and then I'll hand over to you again.
Where are they? 'Cause I didn't see them.
No worries. The first one is, I'll just read it out to you. It's, I'll do the two of them and then hand over to you, and hopefully you'll remember, but if not, come back to me. The first question is, what if your child does not like the texture of fruit and vegetables, for example, things like bananas and pumpkin? And we have another question about what are your top tips for healthy choices when eating out with children? And there's another one, just one second. And what happens if you use the division of responsibility strategy and your child eats too much and starts gaining excess weight? So if you just hold on a second, I will hand it back again to you. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm back again. It seems that there were some questions. I just couldn't see them. So the first question was, what happens when your child doesn't like the texture of certain vegetables or fruits for that matter? And I guess, you know, texture is something that is very unique and our acceptance of texture really is a very individual thing. But to be honest, there is always ways of disguising fruits and vegetables in other foods if textures can be an issue. So if it's just single vegetables and fruits, well, perhaps we just leave those and know that if they're eating well from other fruits and vegetables, then it's not a big deal. If perhaps your child doesn't like bananas, the texture of bananas, or I think pumpkin was the other concern. But you know, you could just as likely mash that banana into oats in the morning, and you lose that texture into oats unless it's the flavour that they don't like. But I wouldn't be too concerned about isolated fruits or vegetables that perhaps are posing an issue. I would be more concerned if it was all fruit or all vegetables, to be honest, because if they're eating other things, then that should be fine. Now, the other question was top tips for healthy eating choices when you're out with your children. Look, to be honest, as personally speaking, if we're talking about eating out as in restaurants, then you can't go past an Asian restaurant because honestly, rice is one of the most easiest things for kids to just chow into, so to speak. And with Asian food, you can generally, particularly Chinese and some of the less spicier foods, you can easily pull out the meats and the vegetables from dishes for them to try. And the other thing is, with a lot of Asian dishes, you can ask for things, for sauces on the side, and you can do that with any sort of restaurant meals, asking for sauces on the side. So particularly, when we eat Thai, we will, usually do the satay chicken skewers. The kids love the skewers, and the sauce comes on. We ask for the sauce on the side, and they can choose to eat that or not. Often it might be a little bit spicy. They don't want it, but if it's a lesser spicy one, then they'll be, loving to dip their chicken skewers into that satay sauce. And so I think any cuisine that when you're eating out where you can get plainer versions is great. To be honest, to so many places when you eat out these days, the kids' options are always chicken nuggets and chicken schnitzels and fried fish. Not that fish and chips is a big favourite in our house at the best of times, but to be able to expose your kids to food when you're out, and to be able to to expose your children to new tastes and flavours when you're out, I think is a fantastic opportunity. So, as I said, the foods that are not too spicy and having sauces and things on the side works really well if you're out. And the other question was using the division of responsibility, and what happens if you've got a child who just relishes in that and eats so much that they put on weight. And I guess really, if we're actually, that comes down to that question really feeds into our responsibility. And so if we make sure that the proportions of food we provide our children are such that there are more low kilojoule foods on offer, so that the thing is, children can fill up on veggies till the cows come home, but they're very unlikely to gain a lot of weight by eating too many vegetables. So if you do have a big eater, I guess first of all making sure that they actually are putting lots of vegetables on their plate, and keeping the meat and the potato serves or the starchy vegetables, those ones that do contribute more of the kilojoules, to just just a smaller proportion. And we can teach our children about what a healthy plate should look like. And if you imagine a clock, well, we probably want to see around half of our clock, so from 12 to 6, looking full of vegetables, okay? And then we might want from 6 until 9, and that's our meat. And then from 9 till 12, that other quarter of the plate would be that starchy food, the potatoes or the rice or the pasta. And so, as part of our responsibility around food, it's teaching our kids what a healthy meal should look like. And I guess how a plate should be set out in terms of proportions is just part of that. But the other thing I would encourage parents with children who are perhaps big eaters is to have them slow down with their eating, and also if they want to have seconds, maybe you need to actually put a bit of a break in there and say, okay, let's just, if they're wanting to have seconds and everyone else is still eating, perhaps you need to say, how about you wait until everyone's finished and see if you're still hungry and still need more food when everyone else is finished. Because sometimes it takes a while for our brain to actually hear what our stomach is saying to us, which is why eating slowly is much better. If you eat quickly, you're less likely to catch your cues for fullness. So there's a couple of tips there around those children that are, may perhaps be more vigorous eaters than others. And I'm just wondering whether or not we might have some more questions.
Can you hear me, Karen?
Yep.
Just a couple of more questions have come in. There's someone asking, what do you do when the baby chucks food onto the floor? And also someone asking about Asian food, or restaurant food and takeaway food can be high in MSG. Is that okay for children?
Okay. All right, well, I'll address the throwing the food on the floor. What happens when your baby chucks food? Look, to be honest, throwing food, squashing food, wearing food on their face, food on the wall, so much of that is normal behaviour around experiencing food for children. And obviously there's a point where it's unacceptable behaviour, but depending on the age of your child, I mean, babies go through a stage where they want to chuck everything on the floor anyway. And so, I mean, I really do encourage parents with babies to make sure you have a big plastic mat on the floor so that you don't have to be stressed about things going on the floor. If food goes on the floor, they don't want to eat it. And so I guess that is just feeds back into that division of responsibility. But there is a point with babies particularly where the whole experience around food is not just the eating part, and we have to accept that, and that will change. But particularly in those early days around food and finger food, a lot more of it can often go elsewhere other than in their mouth. But the thing is, if they're hungry, they will eat, and I guess that is something that you should really just be reassured with. I found that eating outside was often the best place when we were going through that stage with my children, because I guess what you want to do is you want to minimise your stress. So your children are going to do these things, and sometimes we're not going to be able to stop them. So just making it easier for you so that you don't get upset and stressed and because the other thing is that you get upset and stressed and cross or angry, and then that feeds the behaviour. So you don't want to feed the behaviour. You want to actually, you want to ignore that behaviour so that it's not seen as something that gets great attention. And there was another question about restaurant foods and MSG. Look, you can all, I do believe that MSG in restaurant foods is significantly less these days than it has been, because MSG got a very, very bad rap in the 70s, and Asian restaurants have really moved away from the use of MSG. But that said, if you are taking your child to an Asian restaurant and you are concerned about MSG, then I think it's just important to ask, and I think it's probably not unreasonable for you to ask for MSG food, MSG-free food, if you're in a restaurant with your children. Because the thing is, MSG is really just another form of salt and getting sodium into your kids, and we don't want our children to be having high sodium diets.
Okay, and I think we've got just one last question has just come in, Karen. It's someone who has a daughter she describes as a grazer, who will eat a little bit, then get up and walk around, and then go back a bit later. And she's just wondering, is that a big deal?
Grazers. Look, it's only a big deal if it concerns you, really. Personally, it would drive me nuts. But the thing is, if you're happy with having a grazer and you don't mind leaving a little pot of food there that they can go backwards and forwards to, then that's fine. I guess the problem with grazers is that they never actually they never actually get that fullness and then emptiness and then hunger kind of cycle, because they've constantly got something in their tummy all the time and they're constantly eating. And so if it is a concern, I mean, really what you can do is you can just basically draw the line and say, okay, this meal is over, and if you want something more to eat, you need to wait until the next meal. and that's it. And to persist with that over a period of time, you might find that you can turn your grazer around. However, if it really proves to be too difficult, then maybe it is simply a grazer that you have. And provided you're happy to have, as I said, you know, to have a constant meal on the go, look, that it really is just going to be a family decision. But as I said, you know, grazers can tend to kids that are eating all the time don't ever really get that hungry, and so their interest at meal times in food is kind of marred by that constantly having the edge taken off their hunger.
Okay, Karen, and just one point to follow up on something you said earlier. We just had to query, you talked about teaching children that it's not okay to throw food. At what age can you start teaching them to do this?
Oh, look, I mean, you can start teaching your children that it's not appropriate to throw food right from the go-get, really. I mean, but it's a question of whether or not they're capable of actually understanding that instruction. So, I mean, it's never really acceptable to throw food, and a no, we don't throw food, is really what the response to food being thrown on the floor. However, I guess what I'm saying also is that it's not something that we can really get very angry about when our babies are smaller, because they really don't understand, and it is that whole throwing things is really just a developmental stage whereby they're just working out, well, what the devil do I do with this stuff? I can throw it, I can mash it, I can, you know, I can eat it as well, but hey, it's just as fun to do these things. So really, I think the constant message throughout from babies to toddlers is that it's not acceptable to throw food. However, the time to get it's just important not to make that an issue and a battle point at mealtimes, particularly with very young children.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen. That were some great practical advice and tips there. I know I certainly agree with the self-serve and shared plate idea. It helped me with my fussy eater, and so at 13 she describes help yourself dinners as her favourites. Some of you have sent questions to see if you would be able to refer to the webinar again. We have recorded it, and we do hope to be able to put that up on the website. Once we get this done over the next couple of days, I will email you to tell you how you can access it. And also, if you'd like to reply to that email and tell us about any other topics you'd like us to see cover in webinars, we would be delighted to investigate those further. Thanks again to Karen, and I hope you found it useful, and we look forward to hearing from you again. Bye.